Good morning. Welcome to the Celtic Down Under takeover on a Celtic State of Mind on day 2 of the 24-hour weekender to raise money for wee Jamie Tierney. Thank you for joining us. I'm Paul Massey. I'll be your host for today. I'm joined by two Steves, Stephen McCutcheon and Steve Smith, both based in Sydney. I'm in Western Australia, Perth. Guys, you want a quick introduction before we get into it? Stephen?
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, great to be here. I'm Stephen. As Paul said, based in Sydney. A regular on the Celtic Down Under podcast, and also on a couple of other things. I've done a bit on Acsom as well, so maybe familiar to some people. But really delighted to be able to contribute to an excellent cause.
Thanks, Stephen.
And likewise. Likewise. Very, very pleased to play a small part in this. I'm less regular than Stevie in terms of Celtic Down Under appearances, but when I do appear, I've got a bit of a statistical bent, so I quite like the numbers around Celtic, and we'll play to that a little bit over the next hour.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah, Steve's done a fair amount of the legwork on this show, which we've thrown together relatively quickly in the last few days. So, look, obviously, it's a bit remiss to just move into things without commenting that it's pretty bad morning all around, given what went on yesterday. But at every channel, and certainly at Celtic Down Under, we got just a bit of background on us. We go out twice a week live, and we have a recorded show that goes out weekly. Which I'm on. The recorded show is a deep analysis on the match, so we will be recording that tomorrow, and that'll be out probably Tuesday. And then we have 2 live shows that go out at 7:30 Melbourne time, so work backwards from there. 7:30 p.m. on a Monday and a Thursday. So we have plenty of opportunity for the Celtic Down Under roster to pour over yesterday's. Shambles is probably a good word for it, but we don't want to concentrate on that today. We want to try and lift your mood a little bit, look back at basically the on point with Celtic Down Under, and we're obviously all Australian based and New Zealand based, and we wanted to focus on the greatest Celtic's greatest ever Aussies. So we ran a poll, 24-hour poll on Thursday morning our time through to Friday morning, and despite it only being open for a little while, we received over 1,000 responses, which was amazing. So we really appreciate anyone that got involved there. And we basically had a bit of a sort of cobbled together a long list. I think we had 12 names on it, which I'll sort of get to in a second. And yeah, we just wanted to sort of do a bit of analysis on that and look back on key memories of those. So I'll just sort of jump on and get the list that we had. So the list was split because I think it was every Australian that was connected to the club that certainly we sort of covered. And we'll do so. I'll give you a reverse order, and then we'll get into more of a detailed discussion on it. So on one single vote was Liam Bonnetig. For anyone who doesn't know who Liam Bonnetig is, he's a B team player that's recently joined the club. Daniel Arzani was next in the poll on 2 votes. Surprised he even mustered those, given his very short career with us. In an Austrian Dumb and Dumber style joke, we sneaked Moritz Bauer into the poll, and he managed to snaffle 3 votes. Marco Tilio, also 3 votes. And then we're into the sort of more of the key players. We got Jackson Irvine, 22 votes. Viduka 20, Mark Viduka 25, Harry Kuehl 29, and then we're into the key ones. So Scott McDonald, Skippy came in 5th, Jacinta came in 4th, Aaron Moy, big impact but not around for very long, so maybe a little bit of recency bias there, but maybe not. We'll get into that. Came 3rd. And duking it out for the top 2 spots. It's not really a major surprise who was there, but it might be a surprise in terms of the result. We had Ange Postecoglou pipped in 2nd place and taken more than half the vote and more than double the votes of Big Ange was the Wizard of Oz himself, Big Tam Rogic, if I put my teeth in. So that's how the poll came out. I potentially think that maybe if we'd gone another 24 hours or so, or certainly after that result, we might have got a few more votes flowing through to Ange. But yeah, that was the poll. I'll just jump to you, Stephen. What was your initial thoughts on how we sort of landed with that?
Oh, I'm a big Tom Rogic fan, so must confess I did, of the 553 votes, I think I voted for him a good 543 of them, so no, I love the fact that down here we've had a fairly recent, I would say, but fairly significant impact to the club, and it's great to see some of these names and remind ourselves of some of the highlights and unfortunately some of the lowlights as well. But we'll go through them as we go through it. But I could trip down memory lane.
And Stephen, were you surprised by the top 3 or 4 or 5?
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised that Ange polled less votes than Tommy Rogic. I thought Ange would be a clear winner, considering the success he brought to the club over the last couple of seasons before he moved on. But I guess there's still maybe a little bit of resentment there over the way he left, and I think that's maybe why Rogic has scored more votes.
Absolutely. So I'm not probably going to dwell on like Liam Bonnetig's on the B team. He's just a kid. Probably not going to dwell on him. Daniel Arzani, I don't think there's, he was unlucky with an injury. He looked a good prospect. But he didn't. He got injured. I think he got injured. How many minutes was he in before he got his injury in his first appearance?
23 minutes. So he gathered 2 votes and he only made 2 appearances for the club. First one in October 2018, 23 minutes against Dundee. And I don't know about you, but this is one I do remember. I think he did his ACL in the corner, and it actually made quite a good impact, in the 23 minutes he was on. But I seem to remember him getting stretchered off and waving and applauding the crowd as he did it, so a bit of impact there. And then 2 years later, January 2020, he made his second appearance against Partick Thistle just for the 5 minutes. So a sum total of 28 minutes to get his 2 votes. So obviously some Arzani family members, followed Celtic down under. So yeah,
maybe. It was I'd completely forgotten about that second appearance. Understandably so, given how brief it was and how long after the first. I sort of had memories of the ACL injury being, because he was a great prospect, right? He came off the books of City, and he was well regarded down here, which is obviously we've got that extra insight. But yeah, terrible luck, and obviously he's never really achieved much since. So, and then obviously
he scored last night for Melbourne victory.
Yeah,
he scored last night against Sydney FC. Yeah. I noticed.
Yeah, how old is he now?
I was going to say
for the victory.
How old would he be now? Like, he'd be well through his career now, wouldn't he?
I don't know how old he is.
No, he's mid-20s. He's still relatively young, but he's back playing A-League and featuring, playing quite well for Victory. So still a bit frustrating in terms of, he's one of these wingers that like to beat the same man 2 or 3 times. But no, he's certainly doing fairly well for Shane's Victory. So yeah.
Yeah, Shane, one of our other contributors. We're not exclusively Scottish contributors on Celtic Down Under. We do have a few token Aussies, including Shane Beaton, and obviously our leader, Jared. But let's move on. So Tilio's next, and look, he's sort of getting the Arzani comparisons, maybe a little bit unfairly. And look, we know that he's got talent. Whether he can, transition that into being a successful player at Celtic still remains to be seen. He's obviously not had the best of luck with the start. What do we've got any key thoughts on how Tilio might sort of move forward in the next, certainly with the window coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I'll maybe go first and then.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to.
You go, Steve. Okay. Sorry.
No, sorry, mate. You go.
All right. So look, he's similar, very similar stats to Arzani. Just the 2 appearances. He got a minute against Motherwell, a couple of weeks back, and then 27 minutes against Hibs. I mean, I'd love to see him do well, but the initial reaction of, is he the Jota replacement, I think was well kind of overpitched. I certainly don't see him as that. I think he could be a really useful squad member, but I don't see him as being the one to take over that mantle. Sorry, Steve, you come in.
Yeah, I think you've got to feel a little bit of sympathy for him. I think he's been caught up in the general sort of shambolic nature of the squad rotation this season so far. I don't think he's done anything wrong, particularly in the 2 appearances he's had, but just seems to disappear straight back out of the squad in the very next game. So I'm not really sure what's going on with him. I'm not sure what Rodgers is seeing on the training ground. But given how some of our other wingers are performing, I think he's due a run. And I was particularly disappointed the last couple of benches where he didn't make at all. I was expecting him to see at the weekend there. And you look at the output from the likes of Mikey Johnson, I just can't understand why he's not had a run.
Yeah, it's definitely a head scratcher. But hopefully he will get opportunities. I think one of the biggest frustrations, and we're not going to dwell too much on the current issues, but it's just that lack of consistency in squads, especially benches. You're on the bench, you come on, you make an impact, even of some degree. Look at Lagerbielke, scores the winner, and then can't make the squad. And it just seems a consistent thing where we've got this sort of, rotating door on the bench in the squad, and it must be difficult for players to, one, get any kind of run and then build their confidence as well. So plenty to go in there. Hopefully he gets a crack in, because there's definitely talent there. But he's definitely got a bit of developing to go. Just getting through the next couple, and then we'll get into the guts of the sort of top 5. Jackson Irvine was next, and become a bit of a cult figure. He still regularly pulls. He loves a retro top or an old top, and he sort of wears them in his social life or pre-game as well. And he still gets photographed with old Celtic tops on and stuff. So there's obviously still an affection. And he was one of the earlier Aussies, and obviously had a decent stint at Livingston as well. And I think he's maybe still the skipper at St. Pauli. He's sort of carved out a pretty decent career for himself. Obviously being a key player for the Aussie national team, the Socceroos. But Steve, you'll be able to confirm this more accurately. Did he ever play a first team match for Celtic?
Well, I think he did. I think he got 45 minutes against Hibs back in, I want to say 2012, but from my handwriting, which is a bit bizarre that he's kind of gathered, the votes that he did. But like you say, I think there's a bit of recency bias here as well, because he turned up at the Australia Socceroos camp in Qatar wearing a Marco Viduka replica top. Celtic replica top, and I think that got a lot of Celtic down under attention. So yeah, but I think just the one appearance, 45 minutes against Hibs, 2-2 draw, September 2012.
Yeah, I think he basically is winning from like the cult figure status, and he's a popular Socceroo as well. So that's probably the Venn diagram crossover for Jackson Irvine's votes. Harry Kewell, he got put in there, obviously. Never obviously played for us on the coaching staff, at least for now. Rumours of him being linked elsewhere, including Japan. Probably don't need to dwell too much on Harry unless anyone's got any strong comments about Kewell's contribution.
No, nothing to add from my side.
Well, let's just push on. Sorry, I've jumped Duke. So Viduka, a man who has got probably quite a polarizing effect on the support, because he was a phenomenal talent, as we all know. But maybe his application was not as good. Well, not as good as it could be, and then he'll be forever remembered for refusing to go back out in the Inverness Caley-Thistle game, which I had the misfortune to attend twice. So, those of you old enough to remember that fixture, it was a Saturday fixture, third round of the Scottish Cup. Everyone was in the ground. Play was due to start, and a bit of the main stand roof had come loose. It had been pretty high winds. It was obviously January. It was winter, and it was deemed unsafe. And so the game was never even started. It was postponed. And these are the days when I was a student in Aberdeen. So that was a 4-hour bus journey down the road and back up the road to see no football. And being a student at the time, we had Wednesday afternoons off to do, sports and other activities. So I got back on the supporters bus and came back down for the Wednesday. And I think we all know what happened on the Wednesday night. So if Viduka thought he was upset at halftime, he was nowhere near as upset as I was, having done that journey twice in 4 or 5 days or whatever it was. So, but what a player! Aside from memories of Viduka as a player, Steve.
What?
Steven,
just quickly.
Okay, yeah, go.
No, just quickly. I was surprised how few appearances. I mean, like, he was at the club for 2 years, and I've only got him down as 34 appearances, albeit scoring 28 goals in the 34 appearances. So, was he out injured for a period or over the 2 years?
My memory is a bit sketchy. I thought he was pretty consistent, to be honest. Obviously, the period after that when he down tools. So the two big things about his lack of appearance was when he was signed. I think he just didn't turn up. Was that when he signed? Am I right with that?
Yeah. He signed and then immediately disappeared to Australia, back down to Melbourne. No one at the club knew a thing about where he was or what he was doing. And his official line was he was dealing with some mental health issues or something. So I guess that should have been a warning sign for us about what we were getting. And it was a very rocky relationship between Celtic and Mark Viduka. Probably one of the first memories I've got him is changing his name from Marco to Mark for some strange reason. I still don't really know why he did that. But when we played Croatia Zagreb in the European Cup, as it was the year before we signed him, and he was Marco Viduka, and he scored a couple of goals against us and really ran riot, especially in the away leg over there in Zagreb. But then we signed him and he just disappeared and nobody knew anything about him. We finally got to see him. I think his debut was in a cup tie away to Morton. If it wasn't his debut, it was pretty close to it. And he scored a couple of cracking goals and I think a 4-2 win. And then we quickly learned he was a fabulous player, the best striker we'd had in a long time. Just not the type of guy though you need when the chips are down. And at that particular time in Celtic's history, the chips were down quite a lot, and he just wasn't the guy you needed to have you next to you in the trenches. But gave us some really memorable highlights. Scored a great goal against Rangers in a 1-1 draw at Celtic Park when Marco Negri had given them the lead, and he was from about 25 yards out. He was running kind of a cross goal from left to right, and he just swivelled and stuck it into the far corner beyond Stefan Klos. An absolutely brilliant goal, but it sadly wasn't enough, and he didn't have the heart for the fight when it came down to it. So, and you can't allow that sort of thing to happen. Just refusing to play the second half of a game. So, he was rightly shown the door when he was, but probably a case of what could have been with Mark Viduka.
Absolutely. The thing I remember most about him from the playing side is just a phenomenal touch for such a big player. Like he ability to, he had it all as a centre forward, right? He close control, really strong, held the ball up, linked well, great finisher, good hit. Obviously, a big lad, good in the air, but actually, like, not as good in the air. Like, he looked like a big old fashioned number 9, but he played like a classic modern forward who can spin his defender, could go both sides. But just his touch, the touch and the close control. I remember maybe against Aberdeen, he did a little Cruyff turn in no space and a great finish. I think maybe scored a hat-trick up there. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, you're absolutely spot on. Great player, sort of mercurial talent with a bit of a weird attitude. I think you know, if it's interesting you touch on the mental health stuff, because I think if you put him in the modern game, the fan base and generally people would have been a bit more sympathetic to maybe, you know, his situation, but that wasn't the case in the 90s, and he maybe didn't get the support he probably could have done with. He's still a mercurial character because nobody seems to know quite where he is or what he's doing now. There's, you know, some people say he's running a coffee shop back in Croatia and he's sort of keeping out of the limelight. I've heard other stories that he's sort of sneaked back to Australia and he's sort of living the regional life, rural Australia, kind of keeping his head down and not really getting involved. Either could be true or neither could be true. It's sort of he's a bit of a kind of, like I say, a sort of mercurial guy. But yeah, one that got away probably in terms of how getting the most out of him. That wasn't uncommon back in that time. If we think about some of the other strikers, particularly that flowed through at that time. Right, well, time's marching on. We'll get into the top five. So Scotty McDonald comes in 5th place. Steve, do you want to just give us some background before we get into sort of chat and memory?
Will do. Joined us in March 2007, so I'm guessing that was maybe before transfer window was shaped the way it is, or yeah, whatever. Joined us from Motherwell, of course. We'll talk a little bit about that. For I think it was around about 700,000 sterling. Seemingly, the Rangers were after him and they had put in a bid for about 400,000. But Strachan was, really keen, so got him across the line. 118 appearances between 2007 and February 2010. And in those 118 appearances, 59 goals, including a goal that I think you're going to comment on, Paul. I think you've got one in specific.
Yeah,
memory.
look, there's a couple. Well, there's sort of there's 3 goals. I'll tell you what, I'm going to pass to Stephen first to give us some of the kind of, I guess, a bit of a history lesson for those that weren't around there in terms of the context and backdrop to Skippy pre-arriving at us, and then obviously how what he had to deal with as a backdrop, and then how he did from there.
Yeah, I think prior to playing for Celtic, he would be best known for scoring the 2 goals that handed the league title to Rangers on the last day of the season, and what has become known as Black Sunday for Celtic fans anyway. And that was, there was always a suggestion it was a Celtic supporter, but he scored those 2 goals and he celebrated with gusto. And for that reason, it took Celtic fans quite a long time to take to him, I would say. And it's something that sort of lived with him right through his whole career. But he scored enough goals for Celtic and turned in enough brilliant performances, especially against Rangers, to anything he'd done that day. But that was one of my darkest days as a Celtic supporter. So you can't downplay how bad that was. It was just an awful day, and his name will be forever synonymous with that. But he went on to give us some great memories.
Yeah, he did, and it was pretty dark day. I remember that day. I was watching the supporters. I was based in Leeds for a good chunk of the 2000s, and the supporters club travelled up, and that's who I supported with the Wim the Tim CSC coming out of Leeds. But that afternoon was pretty dark in the pub that we drank in and watched the games when we didn't travel. It was. I'm sure anyone that was around at that time had similar experiences. It wasn't a great. I didn't hang around too much after that game. I got up the road because the mood was pretty hostile and dark. So, but yeah, he did sort of he did turn it around. And yeah, I've got sort of 3 Skippy memories, which 2 of which a lot of people will share. The third one, people will remember the goal, but my experience was pretty quirky. I'll start there. It was a Old Firm game, as they once were, and I was up in Glasgow, but I didn't have a ticket for the game. It was at Ibrox, and wherever I was staying, we didn't have Sky or whichever was showing it, so I had to go to the pub. But for whatever, I think my grandparents or grand was in the West End, and for whatever reason, I didn't travel much. I wasn't getting around to different part of Glasgow to watch it. I just went and watched it with my brother in the West End, and we watched it in now I can't remember the name of this pub, but it's in Highland, the Rock, I think it's called, in Highland at the top of the hill. Anyway, it's the only time I think I've ever watched a Celtic Rangers game in a mixed pub. It was one of the most weird, in Glasgow as well. Like, I know it's the West End and it's a little bit genteel, but it's still Glasgow and it's still the Derby. I was like, and they had half kind of split the pub, so there was Celtic fans on one half of the pub and Rangers fans on the other half of the pub. And it was the game. I think it was late December 20, might be the 27th. I was watching the goal back later. I think it was 27th of December, 2008, maybe 7 or 8. And it came in. Ball came into the box. It was back to goal, and he sort of controls it in his chest, then on the thigh, and he swivels and smashes it right in the top corner, and we win 1-0. It's a great win. So people will remember that goal, but I remember that goal because half the pub went absolutely mental, and the other half of the pub was sort of screaming and shouting. I was like, "Oh, this is not a great idea." But it caught us sort of roughly, like there was enough of a kind of ceasefire to kind of get out of there alive. But it was one of the weirdest experiences I've had as a Celtic supporter. So that was one goal, and then the two others are Champions League goals, and most Celtic fans that are old enough to remember this, if they weren't in the ground that night, they will probably still remember. I was lucky enough to be in the ground on both of these occasions. He scored a brilliant goal against Manchester United, where he lobs the keeper, and Stephen, you may remember this one as well. But I think that was a winner potentially. You correct me if I'm wrong. You're better at the knowledge, but I'm pretty sure that was a winner that night, or a draw maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was a draw. My memory's kind of failing me at the moment, but I remember the goal.
Cracking finish.
I remember the final score. Yeah.
But I remember the place went absolutely nuts, as it does on these big nights and against big teams when we score great goals. But the really amazing Champions League night that will forever be tied to Skippy is when we beat Milan 2-1. We'd taken the lead with a pretty scruffy goal from a corner, front post scuffed through, and McManus arrived at the back post completely unmarked. I think the Milan defender knocked it over the line in the end, and it was borderline an own goal. They got a really soft penalty. Naylor was sort of entangled, a bit of a wraparound, and the ref gave it pretty soft. You get it every day these days, but it was pretty soft back then. And then sort of real late on, like injury time or last minute stuff, I think it was Massimo Donati smashed a shot after a bit of a sort of ping-ponging around the penalty arcs. The ball arrives at Donati from outside the box, and that's a blast from the past. He didn't make that many games, but against his old club, he smashes one and it's going towards the bottom corner, and Dida, who's made a remarkable, was it maybe it was a sub goalie, I can't remember. That's the same game as he sort of got injured when he got tapped on the side of the head. Anyway, the keeper made I can't remember if he went off or not. Anyway, the keeper made a great save, but Skippy was loitering and just tucked it away brilliantly in the bottom corner, and he ran to the far corner between the North Stand and the Jock Stein. And the barriers came down, the advertising hoardings came down, and grown men and women are spilling onto the track side. The place went absolutely nuts. I was at the same end, but my season ticket used to be in the other corner, the main stand, Jock Stein corner. So we could see this all like just straight across the touchline, and it was an amazing. Those Champions League nights back then when we were a genuine force, especially at home. That's a memory that goes. That's up there with, for me, for Champions League nights. That's up there with the Nakamura Man United game, which I was also lucky enough to be at during that period. Skippy has definitely left us with some memories. Conscious of time, we will keep moving. So the next one is a bit of a unless, sorry, Stephen, you got any Skippy memories in terms of games, goals?
Yeah, I was just going to say there's a couple of things stood out with me when I was thinking about Scott McDonald. One was a goal against Rangers at Celtic Park when he got in the end of I think it was a Giorgio Samaras header on, and he was through 1-on-1 with the goalkeeper, took it on the volley and just smashed it home. And I think it was the first five minutes of the game or something, and it set the tone for I think it was an easy win for us that day. Can't remember the final score, but probably my best memory of him was a goal. It wasn't even him that scored. It was in the run into the 2008 season where we played Rangers at Celtic Park. I think we were I can't remember exactly how much, but we were a lot of points behind them. And this was at the must-win game of all must-win games, even to hang in the title race. It was the game that Nakamura had scored an absolute perler with the outside of his left foot early on. But unfortunately, Nacho Novo equalised for Rangers just into the second half. But it trailed on into injury time, and Gary Caldwell picked the ball up, chipped across to the back post, and there was Scott McDonald who'd peeled free. Could have took it on his chest to try to score himself, but headed it back across goal very intelligently. And Vennegoor of Hesselink was there to nod it home. And I remember the scenes that day. I was over here watching that, and obviously it was a midweek game, so it was early in the morning. And I can remember doing cartwheels round about my house. And it was just a fantastic day and a very emotional time for the club, because it was we were heading towards Tommy Burns passing away a few weeks later, and then clinching the title up at Tannadice. So it was a very, very important contribution from Skippy, even though it wasn't one of the goals he scored. But yeah, that's one of my best memories.
Yeah, you're spot on. I just remember that. Just as you started to tell that story, I was like, of course, I would have forgotten that. I was in the ground that night as well. My mate nearly missed the Nakamura goal. He just arrived just as it, like literally 2 minutes before it went in. I had a ticket in the main stand that night. I think it was bizarrely, my mate sorted me out, so I wasn't on my usual ticket. I was up from Leeds again. And yeah, that phenomenal. And the other thing to note about that game is he missed a penalty just before, late in the game, because Carlos Cuellar saved one under the bar, took the marching orders, but thought he'd saved him a point. Because I think Stefan Kloss made a really good save from a Skippy penalty. It wasn't the best struck penalty, but it was down in the corner and he made a good save. So yeah, for him to get his head back in the game and sort of be, I guess, composed enough to bring Vennegoor to Hesselink. And yeah, you're right. That's as loud as it got in there as well. It was a brilliant night. So yeah, Skippy well and truly deserves his place in sort of Celtic's history and amongst the greatest Aussies to have pulled on the shirt. The next one is a quirky one, but the vote's the vote. And yeah, Jacinta, recent player. Steve, do you want to give us the stats on Jacinta, and then we'll have a quick chat?
Yeah, just a couple of quick points on Jacinta. Joined Celtic from Napoli, so kind of came through Melbourne City. Then I think was over your way at Perth Glory, then had a period at West Ham, then Napoli, and then joined Celtic in February 2021. Of course, left for Sporting Lisbon in July this year as part of the Great Australian Exodus, as I think of it. During that period, she made 25 appearances with 15 goals. So quite a notable contribution in a period where the Celtic women's team really took massive strides forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think she definitely returned a fair amount of goals, but she probably I don't think we've got the assists. Unfortunately, getting the information on the women's game is not that easy. But she'd have been responsible for a good chunk of assists, because she used to take the corners and most of the set plays during that period, and really good delivery into the box, and scored a lot of goals. I remember Caitlin Hayes probably benefiting a lot from her set piece contribution. And yeah, look, again, maybe a bit of recency bias, maybe a bit of recognition as the only women's player on the list, which is fine. And I guess one of my concerns, I don't think we can do cover this part of the list without acknowledging the fact that there's a bit of a butterfly effect here with Jacinta, in that if we as a club took women's football a bit more seriously, and we have made strides, you're right to say that, but if we took women's football a bit more seriously and had properly invested, and this mirrors what happens in the men's team as well, and has done for many moons, and we're feeling that again at the moment, is if you'd invested at a position of strength, which at the back of the end of that last season, that was the time to push on, bigger interest and more success than we'd ever had in a women's team, and it is a relatively short period, and then invested from that position of strength, you potentially retain players like Jacinta and others. Most of the big players from last season left, only a few sort of signed on. And if she'd stayed, maybe our defense would be better this season, because I don't think there's any doubt at the moment that we are badly missing Big Carl Starfelt, for all his sort of potential flaws and and criticisms that sort of arrived at his door over the period, we definitely haven't replaced him to the level we should have. And, fair play to them. They're in a relationship. Your personal life is as important as your professional life. And obviously Celtic were reasonably easy to deal with by the looks of it to let him go to Celta Vigo. But in hindsight, take that personal side out of it, we are badly missing Carl Starfelt. And like I say, that there's definitely a butterfly effect there in terms of how we retain players both in the men's team and the women's team.
I'd argue that you could say that for not just Jacinta, but for Aaron Moy, for Ange, and for Rogic as well. I think, and we'll come on to each of them individually, but if you look at the last, period or whatever, each of those would have played, I would argue, a really significant part in terms of, changing the outcome over the last few weeks. And without being, overly dramatic about it, that they all could have made a significant contribution, like you say, and probably arguably leave us in a stronger position than we are right now.
Absolutely. Stephen, anything to add on Jacinta and the Starfelt and the whole thing that sort of the broader issues around that?
Look, I agree with everything you've said. I do think that Jacinta had a bit of a social media profile. Probably the biggest profile out of any the Celtic women's team, and I think that was something definitely that helped grow this interest in the women's team and led to a lot of more fans through the turnstiles. So, and we all know that, myself and Steve have done a bit of work on how social media following, can show how big a football club actually is, and it's something we don't do that well. So Celtic should have leveraged that a lot more and definitely made more of an effort to keep her. The whole thing about, Carl Starfelt leaving to be closer to Jacinta, look, I'm not really buying that, to be honest. He's in Vigo, she's in Lisbon. It's like a 4 or 5 hour drive or something. It's not as if they've moved in next door to each other. So I think, these sort of things could have been, these sort of issues could have been alleviated pretty easily in this day and age. So I'm not really buying that. I think Carl Starfelt just wanted away, and he had an opportunity to play in La Liga, and he took it. And who can really blame him for that? It's a short career, but certainly the club should have done much more to keep Jacinta, just as basically the face of the women's game and a way to grow interest in the team.
You spot on, and I probably done her a bit of a disservice in saying that the main reason to retain was around Starfelt. Obviously not. Like, she was a key player in the women's team and he was a key player in the men's team. So you'd think you might try harder to retain both, given that they're linked. So that was disappointing, but it's just a run of these things lately. So now we're in the top three. We'll crack on because time's marching on. We're sort of 2/3 through our hour. And we obviously need to keep that tight. And we're into the top three. So old Aaron Moy, cult figure again, and a massive cult figure in Australia in the Socceroos, and has become one in a short period at Celtic. Stephen, do you want to just give us the background?
Yeah. So joined us basically Ange season 2, so July 2022. Only with us for the year before he retired, so that one season. Made 42 appearances, scoring 7 goals with 11 assists. But I think he brought so much more than that. I mean, he's got a very, very long and quite illustrious kind of playing history, including a period in St Mirren, which I'd forgotten about. But you could really see the class, so real genuine box to box, as happy disrupting in a defensive sense as he was in terms of building going forward. It's a bit of a shame because I think if you look at his stats, his secondary assists would have been a lot higher. He was very often at that point, where he was breaking up play or initiating the move forward or whatever. But I think it'd be fair to say a slow start for him when he first arrived, but certainly very impactful as the season went on, and in an echo that we'll probably hear for number 2 and for number 1. Geez, I think we could do with him, right here, right now.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Stephen, thoughts on Moy?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, during his spell when he was playing for St Mirren, he only managed to score one goal, and that was against Old Co Rangers. So he got off to a good start. But when he came to Celtic, he had that in his locker straight away. But yeah, I think the struggles that we see just now in the Celtic midfield, we just can't land on the optimum solution for the third midfielder, along with O'Reilly and McGregor, just show exactly how much we're missing Aaron Moy. The team at the moment is absolutely crying out for someone with this football intelligence, with this range of passing, and an absolutely chronically underrated player when he was playing for us. And take him out of that team, and you can see the difference. And yeah, what we would give for another couple of years of Aaron Moy, still a relatively young man. Born just down the road from me here up in northwest Sydney, so a local guy to here. Yeah, we're badly missing him just now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people initially fastened on the fact that he's maybe not the quickest, right? As a player, he's not the quickest. He's not got natural pace, but he's so quick up top. He reads the game so well. He more than makes up for the yard of pace in that. You're right. You're both right. He was just as useful to shut down space and win possession back. He's got a fair amount of dig, but then once he's got it, he's not just an enforcer, right? He's got all the range of passing and the vision. You're right to acknowledge the secondary assists, because quite often he's the guy that plays in the person that gets in a dangerous position to then make the final assist. And he also was rock solid behind the penalty, right? He was our penalty taker when he was on the pitch. And again, that was a challenge. If we look at the current team, for all its woes, that there's a few bright spots, and one of them is Matt O'Reilly, and Matt O'Reilly's really sort of stepped up his game this season. He's one of the few that you could say that about. But he was a good player last season, and Aaron Moy kept him out of the side for most of that second half of the season, the running. He was one of the first names on the team sheet, you would say. Scored those 2 goals at Hearts, which were massive, and sort of went a long way to sort of winning the title. And you just felt, I certainly in that run-in, if he was in the team sheet, you just felt more confident about how things were going to go, because you've got that thing of, somebody who can unpick defenses, but you've also got somebody who can mix it when you need it. And we've missed that for a long time. One of the major criticisms there's nobody with that little kind of streak of evil, if you like, that was willing to mix it. And he had he's a classy footballer, but he had that as well. And I think we're missing that again, right? And we have done for many years. That's what been a major criticism, is when guys like Wanyama and the like moved on, we've never really sort of replaced somebody with that level of dig.
I think we're also missing his post-match interview prowess, which was another absolute strength. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be a pundit, right? I don't think there's any danger of, there's no danger of a media career. But again, fair play to him. Like he's decided for, his family and his wife, and I think his wife's Scottish, right? She met him.
Yes, she is.
He met her when he was at St Mirren. But I think they've moved back to Australia. And so again, sort of living the quiet life, and why not, right? You only get one crack at it. So, but he's definitely a loss, but great, a great contributor for the time he was there. And I think in years to come, we might think of him being around longer than he actually was, because of the extent of his contribution, how brief it was, but how significant it was. So, I think he'll sort of drop into that cult status in years to come as well. Into the big two, and we've got just 15 minutes or so we're going to have to be a little bit more efficient than we've been so far. In second spot, I'd be happy to go back to these days. At the moment, it's Big Ange Postecoglou. Steve.
Yeah. So, I mean, just before I get into the numbers that we have, I just remember the excitement, as an Australian Celtic supporter when, Ange was getting talked about, and the skepticism that everyone showed, and everything. And it felt, I don't know, it felt really good to know just how strong, a managerial candidate he was, but we'll come on to that in a moment. All right, so Ange Postecoglou, technically born in Athens, but claimed by Melbourne, so migrated to Melbourne at the age of 5, 1970. Short playing career with South Melbourne, cut short, bad knee injury, and then a managerial career with South Melbourne, then a couple of the Australian youth sides. Then Whittlesea Zebras, lovely name, and then Brisbane Roar, the VUC, and then the Australian national team, and then ultimately Marinos, Yokohama Marinos in Japan, and then Celtic. So joined Celtic June 2021. Did League Cup and League double in the first year, and then a treble in year 2, and of course left in June 2023. So in that period, he managed 113 games for Celtic with a win rate of 73%, which statistically at least second only to Martin O'Neill with a 75% win rate.
Thanks for the summary, Steve. And I think it's worth pointing out, and most of us know this, but obviously 2 titles at South Melbourne, 2 titles at Brisbane Roar, the title at Marinos, Yokohama, as well as an Asian Cup with the Australian national side, and a qualification for a World Cup before he fell out with the Socceroos brass in potentially a recurring theme. Phenomenal. His career's going up an upward trajectory. Obviously, a bit older than if he'd started in Europe before he gets his bigger gigs. But you know, we had we based in Australia had the luck of knowing a bit more about him, and that it was likely, you know, kind of what was going to pan out like, and obviously that proved to be the case. And then all Celtic fans have had the benefit of knowing how it was likely to go at Spurs, and you know, he's had a bit of adversity and he's had a bit of a wobble, but if you look at the fan comments, how they feel about him, and even now the pundits have started to come around. There was a lot of comments about naivety and you can't defend like that and you can't play like that. And now even the last week or two, they're all going, "Oh, we love it when we get put on a Tottenham game because we know it's going to be a brilliant match. We're going to enjoy watching it. That's how we want football to be played." And I think that's, for me, the overarching memory is 2 things: the quality of the football that was played, but the intent of how football should be played. And you know, a lot of people will criticize this and say, it was all hot air, but how he made you feel or how he made the club feel, he unified a club that was all over the place, and in 2 years, you know, brought us from nowhere to everywhere. And unbelievably, we're almost back where we started in the space of a few months. So regardless of what you think about his intent behind the language, it can't be denied how unifying it was, and how he pulled the club and everybody was leaning in the same direction. Stephen, thoughts?
Yeah, I think that was my main point about Ange Postecoglou. Obviously a great manager, a great technical knowledge of the game, studied under some magnificent coaches down here in Australia. But I think the thing I loved most about Ange was his personality, and how he got everybody on side, as you said. He got everybody behind him. The way he dealt with supporters, the way he dealt with the media, he always seemed to be able to find the right phrase or find the right soundbite at exactly the right time. And it was almost blatant that you could see the point where every Celtic, I think it was a Champions League qualifier against Midtjylland where we lost, everybody could start to see what he was doing, and his comments after the game, everybody just got on board with him. And after that, you know, it was pretty much dissent free. Everyone was behind Ange, and it was just onwards from there in terms of success. And I think that's his main strength, and he's carried that right down to the English Premier League as well. You can see he's got the press seating out his hand down there, and everybody's they're hanging on his every word. I was reading a few stories today. There's a few sort of naysayers sort of trying to make out that it's all for the camera, it's all for show. But you know, it might be, we don't know. I don't know what he's like personally, but it's a talent nonetheless. I imagine he's doing the same thing in the dressing room as well to players who are maybe struggling a little bit with form. He just knows what to say to them and when to say it. Now, in terms of his legacy at Celtic, I think he's probably one season short of sort of cementing his place up there with Martin O'Neill and Jock Stein. But you know, he is just tucked in right behind them in terms of the best Celtic managers I've seen in my lifetime, for sure.
Yeah, I think the quality of the football as well is you know you were excited to look. Even I was lucky enough to be a season ticket holder around the O'Neill period, and I was in Seville and all of that, and that was amazing stuff. But I think the football was even better under. I'm not saying they were a better team, but the style of football that we played was even better than under O'Neill's team. He wasn't probably blessed with the same quality of players, you know, Larsons and Suttons and Hart. He didn't have those superstars. So in some ways, it's almost even more impressive what he achieved. Yeah, just an amazing communicator. And I don't really care if that's his sort of MO everywhere he goes. If it gets the club moving in the right direction and everybody unified, then you're achieving what you're trying to achieve. And he was always going to be ambitious. He's not done at Spurs. You know, they'll feel like we did in a couple of years probably as well. He'll be at City or Liverpool or Real Madrid or Barcelona or who knows, but he can go to the absolute top, right? I don't think he's done at Spurs. Steve, any last thoughts on Ange before?
No, just a couple of little things. I mean, I love Ange. You know, I kind of echo what you say, and just a couple of quick thoughts. We quite often say, you know, culture trumps strategy every time, and he just built a culture around the club. And I know it was a bit cliched or whatever, but the whole, you know, we don't stop, the video, the mic'd up stuff and all the rest of it. And you can, you know, look back on it now and maybe criticize it, whatever, but fundamentally in that moment, he built a culture that transformed into the style of play. You knew how Celtic were going to play, and it was absolute, you know, full thrust right from minute 1 to minute 95, 96, whatever it was. And the second thing was there was just a very early sign that I really liked, the cut of his jib, you know, when he took on the role at Brisbane Roar, and he immediately let go of Bob Malcolm, Charlie Miller and Craig Moore. And I immediately knew that he was a good one, you know, and good to see him land at Celtic, albeit for a short period.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, we could talk about Ange for a whole show probably, but we need to get to the top man in the poll, taking a more than 50% of the votes, and I think a deserved winner given his longevity at the club. Tom Rogic, pretty much 6 titles, 5 Scottish Cups, 5 League Cups. Steve, I'll let you do the full stats, but you know, rattle those and then we'll get into the goals and memories.
Yeah, no worries. So joined in January 2013, a little bit of a false start. You know, he went out on loan and whatnot. I think his breakthrough was more in 2015, and of course, you know, left the club in June 2022. 270 odd appearances over that period, 46 goals and 49 assists. A lot of people would argue career, you know, ended too soon, albeit for very good reasons. You know, he was only 31 years old yesterday, you know, so, and that's what, 18 months after he left Celtic. So kind of interesting history. Would never pick him as a reality TV show winner, but that's what he was. Made it through Nike Football Academy. Honed his skills at futsal before joining the Mariners, and then ultimately making his way to Celtic.
Right, we are running out of time, so we have to get a couple of quick memories on each of us. Stephen, best ever Tom Rogic memory. Pretty obvious, I guess, but
okay. Well, there's been a number. Obviously, I'll leave the cup final.
Do a couple.
I'll leave the cup final winner against Aberdeen for one of you guys. I think I'll pick 2. One of them was a late winner at Rugby Park in Kilmarnock, where he's took the ball in, spun into the middle of the park and cracked it in the top corner of his left foot. Absolutely brilliant. And the other one was the goal at Rangers. I think it was in a 5-0 win, where he again, or was it 5-1? I could be wrong. Same sort of thing. He's cracked the ball with his left foot into the corner from outside the box and managed to cripple a Rangers defender with the same action. I think it was McCrory, wasn't it? I could be wrong about that as well. But
no.
those are my two favourite memories.
Bates. I think it was Bates.
Bates, sorry, yeah.
He ended up at Hamburg. Steve, thoughts on greatest? A few
it has to be Hampden.
Yeah,
it has to be Hampden. That was just phenomenal. I mean, it was the invincible treble, the whole build up. The build up through the game, and I just remember seeing him, get the ball in a tight spot, move into a tighter spot, and it just seemed to be like everything was converging into this, impossible run and angle. And then he gets the ball away and scores, and then just the celebration as well. So the shirt behind me is actually signed by that invincible treble team. I can't make out a single signature on it, so I might need to get some help from the Celtic family at some point. But yeah, a really classic Tom Rogic moment.
Yeah, and I think because it was pouring rain at Hampden, right? And then it's got the photo with the sharp pole. It's iconic. The rain, it just makes it amazing. He just had a habit. He was for me a big game player. Scored big goals. Steve's one at Kelly. Absolutely, we were heading for a 0-0 draw, and he pulled out with the bag to win the game late in the game. Scored big goals at Ibrox. And loved a goal at Hampden. There's loads of goals he scored at Hampden. He scored a few against Rangers. Even more, I think, against Aberdeen in various League Cups, and obviously that one. Everyone will remember his goals. I just love his touch and another big guy with a phenomenal touch. The Wizard of Oz became the nickname, and that left foot was like a wand. It was incredible what he could do with it. The goal against United in the last season he was here was another one for the ages. Just sort of slaloming across the pitch and giving a great finish. I think it was his assist for the Ralston header that really sort of set us on our way up at Dingwall and pushed that season past the sort of wobbly part of the start of the season and sent Ange on his way to his first title. He really grew through his time with Celtic. There was that, especially under Ange. I think Ange got absolute best out of him, and again, it's probably the communication piece in that he would quite often be a 60, 65 minute, 70 minute player for other managers. Certainly he was key under, obviously, as that goal illustrates, he was key under Rodgers' first spell, but he really came to life in the Postecoglou era, and just a phenomenal touch. The assist, he's just as many great assists as he had great goals.
He had a lovely touch, but he also actually was really smart at letting the ball do a lot of the work as well. The number of times he would just let the ball roll across him, and just completely bamboozle, defenders. It was just fantastic to watch. Got quite, reminiscent in terms of looking at some of the highlight reels today, and I think left the club arguably too early, but arguably for good reasons as well. So yeah.
Well, yeah, obviously I think family decision. What we didn't know until it was announced is obviously he'd been through a pretty significant IVF journey with his wife to have the family that he ended up having. So, and for all their problems, the board were quite supportive by the sounds of it in that. So give him an occasional bit of tip of the hat. But yeah, I think a worthy winner given the longevity of his career at Celtic, and lots of iconic moments, particularly, well, none more so than that season to finish it off. And it was a very Celtic way to finish that season off, and he was it took his ability to get it to happen. Look, we're very nearly up. We're in our last sort of minute or so. I want to thank you two guys for joining us. It's great to sort of look back on these Celtic Australian legends. I want to thank Paul John Dykes and the whole Acsom team for inviting Celtic Down Under. We've got a good relationship already, but it was great to be involved in such an amazing weekend. Please click the links to support wee Jamie Tierney. That's what we're all here for. In terms of Celtic Down Under, if you like what we've done and you've not seen us before, please look for us on YouTube, like and subscribe there. Find us on your podcast channels. We're on Spotify and all other major ones. It'd be great to see you there. And as I say, we go out Mondays and Thursdays live, 7:30 Melbourne time, so probably morning for you guys in the UK. Probably all that remains to be said is for me is thanks for joining us, guys, and hail, hail.